As a new year begins, many hearts are filled with determination. Plans are made, goals are written, resolutions are declared with confidence. People promise themselves that this year will be different, that they will be stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more successful. Calendars are filled, strategies are formed, and expectations rise. Yet beneath all this planning, there is often a quiet restlessness, a hidden fear, a question whispered deep within the soul. What if things don't go the way I hope? True peace has never come from perfect plans. If it did, the most organized people would be the most peaceful, the wealthiest would be the most secure. The most prepared would never worry, but life has taught us otherwise. Plans can fail, paths can change, doors can close without warning, health can shift, relationships can strain, and suddenly the plans we trusted are no longer enough to hold us steady. Peace does not come from controlling the future. It comes from trusting the one who already holds it. The new year often tempts us to believe that if we just plan better, work harder, and think smarter, everything will fall into place. But peace was never meant to be produced by human effort alone. Peace is born when the heart stops striving to lead and learns to follow. It begins when the soul says, "I do not know what lies ahead, but I know who walks with me." There is a deep difference between planning with God and planning without Him. Planning without surrender places all the weight on our shoulders. It turns every obstacle into a threat and every delay into a failure. But surrender places the weight where it belongs. It acknowledges human limits and divine wisdom. It understands that God sees what we cannot see, knows what we do not know, and prepares what we cannot prepare. Surrender is not weakness, it is faith in action. It is the quiet confidence that says, "I will take my steps, but I will not walk alone." When we surrender each step to God's leading, we are not giving up responsibility, we are giving up anxiety. We are not abandoning effort, we are abandoning fear. Many enter the new year carrying the exhaustion of the last one. They tried to do everything right. They worked, they planned, they pushed forward, yet peace remained out of reach. That is because peace is not the reward of effort. It is the fruit of trust. Trust grows when we stop demanding certainty and start accepting guidance. God's leading is often gentle, not loud. It does not always shout directions or reveal the entire map. Sometimes it gives just enough light for the next step, and that is where surrender becomes real, not when the path is clear, but when the path is uncertain. Not when answers are obvious, but when faith must speak louder than fear. The heart that insists on perfect plans will never rest, because perfection is fragile. But the heart that surrenders to God's leading finds rest even in imperfection. It learns that delays are not denials, that closed doors can be protection, and that unanswered prayers may be acts of mercy. Peace does not mean the absence of trouble, it means the presence of God in the middle of it. When we surrender each step, we invite God into our decisions, our relationships, our work, our struggles, and our waiting. We begin to walk with awareness instead of anxiety. We stop asking only, "What do I want?" and start asking, "Where are you leading me?" There will be moments in this new year when the road feels unclear, times when prayers seem unanswered and progress feels slow. But surrender teaches us that God's timing is not late, His silence is not absence, and His guidance is not limited by our understanding. The world teaches us to trust ourselves above all else, but faith teaches us something higher, that self-trust has limits in God. Trust has no end. When we rely only on ourselves, peace rises and falls with circumstances. But when we rely on God, peace remains steady even when circumstances shake. Surrender changes how we view success. Success is no longer measured only by outcomes, but by obedience, by faithfulness, by walking where God leads, even when the destination is unknown. This kind of surrender frees the heart from comparison, from pressure, from the constant need to prove something to the world. Many fear surrender because they think it means losing control, but the truth is, we were never in control to begin with. Surrender simply places our lives into hands far wiser and far stronger than our own. It replaces fear with trust and striving with rest. As this new year unfolds, there will be choices to make, some small, some life-changing. Surrender invites God into each one, not just the spiritual moments, but the ordinary ones, not just the big decisions, but the daily steps. When we surrender every step, we acknowledge that God cares not only about our destination, but about our journey. Peace grows when prayer becomes more than words and turns into dependence, when trust becomes more than belief and turns into obedience, when faith becomes more than hope and turns into surrender. There is a quiet strength in the surrendered life. It does not panic easily. It does not crumble under pressure. It does not lose hope when plans change. Because its foundation is not built on certainty, it is built on trust. The surrendered heart learns to wait without despair and to move without fear. It understands that God often works behind the scenes, shaping outcomes long before we see results. It learns that obedience today prepares blessings for tomorrow. True peace in the new year will not come from having all the answers. It will come from knowing who to turn to when questions arise. It will not come from controlling outcomes, but from trusting God with them. When we surrender each step, we stop asking God to bless our plans and start asking Him to guide our steps. And that shift changes everything. It changes how we handle disappointment. It changes how we face uncertainty. It changes how we move forward when the way feels unclear. This kind of peace does not shout, it settles. It anchors the soul. It whispers, "You are not alone. You are being led." The new year will bring challenges, but surrender will bring strength. It will bring clarity in confusion, courage in fear, and hope in waiting. Not because life becomes easier, but because God becomes closer. And when the year ends, the greatest victory will not be how much you achieved, but how faithfully you walked. Not how perfectly you planned, but how fully you trusted. Not how much control you held, but how deeply you surrendered. Because true peace has never been found in perfect plans. It has always been found in surrendered steps, guided by the faithful hand of God. When the Lord goes before you, uncertainty loses its power, and every season, whether filled with joy or marked by trial, becomes part of His divine purpose. This truth is not merely a comforting idea. It is a life-shaping reality for those who dare to trust God beyond what their eyes can see. Life is filled with unknowns. Each morning brings questions we cannot answer, paths we have not walked, and outcomes we cannot control. Yet, the heart that knows God goes before it does not tremble at the unknown, because it understands that the future is not empty. It is already occupied by the presence of the Almighty. Uncertainty often robs people of peace. It whispers fear into the mind and plants doubt in the heart. It asks, what if things don't work out? What if the door closes? What if tomorrow brings pain instead of promise? These questions have troubled humanity since the beginning of time. But when God goes before you, uncertainty is no longer an enemy. It becomes a reminder to trust. The believer does not walk blindly into tomorrow. He walks behind a God who sees the end from the beginning. There are moments when the road ahead looks unclear. Decisions must be made without all the information. Prayers seem unanswered. Doors remain shut longer than expected. In these moments, faith is tested not by what is seen, but by what is trusted. When the Lord goes before you, He is already working in places you cannot reach, arranging circumstances you cannot control, and preparing outcomes you cannot imagine. What feels like delay is often divine preparation. What seems like silence is often God working quietly behind the scenes. Joyful seasons are easy to trust God in. When blessings overflow, prayers are answered quickly, and life moves smoothly, faith feels natural. Gratitude flows easily. Praise comes without effort. But even in joy, God goes before you not just to bless you, but to anchor you. Joy without guidance can lead to pride. Success without surrender can lead to self-reliance. When God goes before you in times of joy, He reminds you that every good gift comes from Him and that your strength did not produce the blessing, you received it by grace. Then come the trials, seasons no one asks for, seasons marked by loss, disappointment, illness, broken relationships, or unanswered prayers. These are the moments when uncertainty tries to take control of the heart. Fear grows louder, faith feels fragile. But when the Lord goes before you, even trials are not wasted. Pain is never meaningless in the hands of God. He does not cause suffering for pleasure, but He uses it for purpose. Trials refine faith, deepen character, and draw hearts closer to Him. There are times when God goes before you by removing something you were holding onto too tightly. A plan falls apart. A door closes, a relationship ends. At first, it feels like loss, but later, clarity comes. God knew that what you were pursuing would limit what He wanted to give. He saw danger where you saw opportunity. He saw bondage where you saw comfort. When God goes before you, He protects you not only from what you fear, but from what you desire that could harm you. Faith grows strongest when it is exercised in uncertainty. Anyone can trust God when the outcome is clear. True faith is trusting Him when the path is hidden. When the Lord goes before you, He may not reveal the entire journey, but He promises His presence every step of the way. He does not always explain the why, but He assures the who. And knowing who walks ahead of you is more important than knowing where the road leads. Every season carries a lesson. Joy teaches gratitude. Trials teach dependence. Waiting teaches patience. Blessings teach stewardship. Loss teaches surrender. When God goes before you, no season is random. Nothing is accidental. What seems chaotic to you is ordered by Him. He weaves joy and sorrow together into a greater story, one that shapes your faith and reflects His glory. There are moments when people pray for God to remove uncertainty, but God chooses instead to remove fear. He does not always change circumstances, but He changes hearts. When the Lord goes before you, He steadies your spirit even when the storm remains. Peace does not come from the absence of trouble. It comes from the assurance of His presence. A calm heart in an uncertain world is one of the greatest testimonies of faith. Walking behind God requires humility. It means admitting that your understanding is limited. It means releasing control and trusting His timing. Many struggle not because God is absent, but because they insist on leading instead of following. When you allow God to go before you, you stop striving to force outcomes. You learn to wait without anxiety, to act without fear, and to trust without conditions. Some seasons feel long. The answers do not come quickly. The breakthrough seems delayed, but delay does not mean denial. When the Lord goes before you, timing becomes purposeful. He knows when you are ready. He knows when the blessing will strengthen you instead of harm you. What you receive too early can become a burden instead of a blessing. God's timing protects you even when it frustrates you. There are people who look back and realize that the hardest seasons of their lives were the ones that shaped them the most. What once felt unbearable became the foundation of deeper faith. What once brought tears later brought testimony. When God goes before you, your pain is never wasted. It is transformed. He turns wounds into wisdom and scars into stories of grace. Uncertainty loses its power when faith rises. Faith does not deny reality. It acknowledges God's authority over reality. The believer may feel fear, but fear does not rule the heart. Doubt may knock, but it does not stay. When the Lord goes before you, courage grows, not because you feel strong, but because you know God is faithful. Every step taken in obedience invites God's guidance. Even small acts of trust matter, a quiet prayer, a surrendered decision, a moment of obedience when no one is watching. When God goes before you, He honors faithfulness in the unseen. He opens doors in ways you did not expect and provides in moments you did not anticipate. There will be times when you look ahead and feel unprepared. The calling feels too big. The responsibility feels overwhelming. But God never leads where He does not also equip. When the Lord goes before you, He prepares you along the way. He gives strength as needed, wisdom when required, and grace in abundance. You do not need tomorrow's strength today. You need today's trust. Joy and trial are not opposites in God's plan. They are partners in growth. One reminds you of His goodness, the other of His faithfulness. When God goes before you, joy does not make you careless, and trials do not make you hopeless. Both draw you closer to Him, shaping a faith that endures. The greatest comfort is knowing that the future does not rest on chance, luck, or human effort. It rests in the hands of a sovereign God. When the Lord goes before you, the unknown becomes sacred ground. Every step is covered by His presence. Every outcome is held by His wisdom. So walk forward without fear. Trust without seeing. Obey without hesitation. Let go of the need to control what only God can manage. When the Lord goes before you, uncertainty loses its grip, and every season, whether marked by laughter or tears, becomes part of a greater purpose. And in the end, you will look back and see not confusion, but divine guidance, not randomness, but redemption, not fear, but faith fulfilled.